Welcome to the debate. In 2024, coal was widely considered an economically dead, highly polluting relic of the past. So, why is the federal government suddenly using Cold War era wartime powers to, inject $700 million into it?
Yeah, that is exactly the question we're tackling today. Is this massive investment a pragmatic, unavoidable necessity to keep our national power grid from collapsing? Or is it, frankly, an unjustified taxpayer bailout of an industry that the free market has already left behind?
Right. And looking through the Department of Energy's policy documents, their recent grid reliability reports, and various environmental analyses, I take the position that this is a critical national security measure. We are facing surging, unprecedented energy demands, and we need this baseline stability to keep the country running.
And I argue it's a costly market distortion. It uses emergency powers to prop up a dying industry, fighting both free market economics and severely compromising public health.
So, to understand why the DOE issued a July 2025 grid reliability report that basically sounded the alarm, you have to look at the physical math of the grid. Right now, there are 104 gigawatts of announced power plant closures across the country.
Wow, 104 gigawatts?
Yeah, it's massive. But only 22 gigawatts of the power replacing them will be firm 24/7 dispatchable power.
Meaning power you can turn on exactly when you need it, regardless of the weather?
Exactly. We're hitting this unique moment where a tidal wave of intermittent renewable energy is coming online, just as electricity demand from AI data centers and mass electrification is going parabolic.
Right. Preserving over 17 gigawatts of existing coal power isn't about nostalgia. It's an essential stopgap. Without it, the DOE projects a 100-fold increase in power outages by 2030.
But framing this as an absolute necessity ignores the market realities that actually drove coal's decline. I mean, coal's share of U.S. electricity plummeted to roughly 15% last year.
Sure, but...
And that's because natural gas and renewables are simply cheaper and cleaner to operate. The market is already responding to these capacity needs with better technology. Renewables made up 88% of all new generation added to the grid in 2025.
Well, if you're listening to this and you've recently put solar panels on your roof, you might be wondering why we're subsidizing 20th century technology when you're generating power at home so efficiently.
Exactly. It seems completely backward. It does. But the invisible catch there is the physical engineering of the broader grid, specifically something called grid inertia.
Right, the physical momentum of the system.
Right. Wind and solar are amazing, but they don't rely on massive, physically spinning, heavy steel turbines. When there's a sudden massive spike in energy demand or a sudden drop in supply, the literal physical momentum, the inertia of a spinning coal or gas turbine, acts as a mechanical shock absorber for the grid.
Right, it buys time.
Exactly. It buys operators crucial seconds to balance the system. If you lose too much of that physical mass too quickly, the whole grid can trip off.
Okay, but even if I accept the engineering argument that we need that physical shock absorber, funding it this way is like taking out a payday loan to pay your mortgage. It might solve your immediate cash flow problem, but it guarantees long-term ruin.
Well, the government has issued 19 emergency orders to prevent...
Exactly. To prevent the closure of places like the Craig Station in Colorado and the Sheffer Station in Indiana. The reason those specific plants were closing is that they are too expensive to run. They fail without this $700 million crutch. And ratepayers ultimately absorb the hidden tax of running uncompetitive plants.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. You cannot tear down a load-bearing wall, in this case, firm, dispatchable coal, while you are still pouring the concrete for a new foundation of intermittent renewables.
But they're not just patching a wall.
How else do we cover the estimated 100 gigawatts of new peak hour supply needed by 2030? Grid operators in those specific regions are waving red flags about capacity shortfalls. The market clearly isn't pricing in the value of that baseline reliability and inertia, so the government has to step in to keep the lights on during multi-day winter freezes.
Okay, but even if the goal is strictly keeping local lights on, that doesn't explain the legal loophole being used here. The administration is invoking the Defense Production Act,
Which is totally valid for
That's a tool designed for national security emergencies, like securing medical supplies during a pandemic or manufacturing munitions. Yet, out of this $700 million, $75 million is going toward a coal export terminal in Oakland, California.
Well, because the administration is defining energy security as the foundation of modern national security.
But half of West Virginia's coal is exported abroad. Pumping public money into export terminals so we can ship raw coal to Asia does not secure the American homeland. It secures the profit margins of legacy mining corporations.
I hear you, but
How does selling a declining product overseas keep the lights on in Indiana?
it doesn't. But you're looking at coal strictly as a fuel to burn, and this is where the national security argument gets really interesting. I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because the DOE's National Energy Technology Laboratory is patenting tech to extract rare earth minerals from coal ash for defense and manufacturing. Doesn't that fundamentally elevate coal from a simple fuel source to a critical strategic material?
Wait, really? So the waste product itself, the ash left over after burning, is being mined?
Exactly. When you burn coal, the combustion process actually concentrates the trace minerals left behind in the ash. We can now extract the exact rare earth elements required for advanced defense systems, aerospace manufacturing, and, ironically, renewable energy components like wind turbine magnets.
Wow, I didn't realize they were using it for wind turbines.
Yeah, that fundamentally changes the equation. We are turning a historic pollutant into a critical strategic material, which perfectly aligns with the Defense Production Act. Plus, that $700 million is being matched by $1.7 billion in private investment to build out these new tech capabilities.
Extracting rare earths from waste ash is a fascinating technological pivot, I'll give you that. But it absolutely does not justify building brand new coal-fired power plants, like the 1.25 gigawatt facility planned for Alaska's pristine Susitna Valley.
Well, Alaska has unique energy needs.
If we are talking about national security, we cannot ignore the profound physical insecurity this creates for the public. I'm talking about the environmental and health data. The data is devastating.
I know the numbers are concerning.
From 1999 to 2020, 460,000 deaths were attributable to air pollution from coal plants. We're talking about toxic mercury, lead, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen oxides. The administration talks about beautiful, clean coal, but we already have alternative energy sources that don't lead to increased hospital visits or respiratory illnesses for communities living in the shadow of smokestacks.
But the administration would argue they aren't just building old-school smokestacks. A massive chunk of the strategy involves modernization.
Sure, but it's still coal.
Right, but the new TerraSpark plant in West Virginia is utilizing advanced carbon capture technology. The DOE actually made $200 billion in low-cost financing available to modernize this infrastructure. It's not about clinging to a dirty past.
It feels like clinging to the past, though.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. If we are actively upgrading these facilities with carbon capture and mineral extraction tech, aren't we performing environmental triage, applying a tourniquet to secure the grid now while treating the emissions issue, rather than letting the entire system collapse?
But building the first new coal plants in over a decade isn't retrofitting an old bridge. It's building a brand new, highly polluting bridge when cheaper, cleaner alternatives exist. Clean energy significantly outperforms coal economically today.
In pure generation cost, yes, but not in reliability. The economy and the grid buckle today because we didn't have enough firm power to sustain the surge of AI and electrification. We won't have the luxury of building that future grid. Investing in modernized coal infrastructure buys us the baseline stability we desperately need right now.
And from my perspective, using emergency wartime powers to prop up an economically outmatched and deadly industry is a massive misallocation of taxpayer dollars. It artificially suppresses the free market's transition and guarantees we keep paying a premium for legacy pollution.
Well, we definitely agree on one undeniable reality. The American power grid is under immense, unprecedented stress right now.
Absolutely. Energy demand is soaring at a rate we haven't seen in generations. The defining engineering challenge of our time is how we meet that demand.
And whether legacy fossil fuels, aided by new extraction and capture technologies, are a necessary bridge or an unnecessary anchor.
Right.
We highly encourage everyone listening to dive deeper into the Department of Energy grid reports and the environmental health data we mentioned today to weigh these profound costs and benefits for themselves.
Because ultimately, every time you flip a switch, you're voting on the future of that grid. The question is whether we are willing to pay a heavy premium to hold on to the infrastructure of the past, or if we trust the market enough to let the future take over.